The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the empty corridors of Lunar Research Station Echo 7. Dr. Han Suji sipped her third cup of coffee as she walked through the quiet laboratory. The clock on the wall showed 11:45 p.m., Earth Standard Time. Being the only xenobiologist on night shift wasn't easy, but Suji preferred the peaceful quiet of these hours. She stopped at her workstation, setting down the coffee cup next to her computer. The screen showed live feeds from various containment chambers, each housing different alien specimens. Most were simple cellular organisms, but chambers 3 and 4 contained more complex life forms. Suji checked the readings. Temperature, pressure, atmospheric composition. Everything looked normal. Almost too normal. The station's lights dimmed slightly, then brightened again. Suji frowned. These power fluctuations had been happening more often lately. The engineering team blamed it on solar activity, but something felt off about their explanation. Computer, run diagnostic on containment chamber 4, Suji commanded, her eyes fixed on the strange readings appearing on her screen. The numbers didn't make sense. The oxygen levels inside the chamber were rising and falling in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. Diagnostic complete. All systems functioning within normal parameters, the computer's calm voice responded. Suji stood up and walked to Chamber 4's observation window. Inside, suspended in a carefully controlled environment, floated what looked like a piece of dark coral. The specimen had been retrieved from an asteroid 3 months ago. Initial tests showed it was organic, but it had shown no signs of activity since arrival. She pressed her hand against the cold glass, squinting to get a better look. For a moment, she thought she saw the specimen shift slightly, but that was impossible. The movement sensors would have detected any change. The clock struck midnight. The lights flickered again, longer this time. Suji's coffee cup rattled on her desk, though there was no vibration she could feel. The temperature in the lab dropped several degrees. Computer, status report, Suji called out, trying to keep her voice steady. All systems functioning within normal parameters, the computer repeated, but this time its voice seemed to echo strangely in the empty lab. Suji turned back to Chamber 4 and froze. The specimen had definitely moved. Instead of floating randomly as it had for months, it now pointed directly at her. She blinked hard, telling herself she was imagining things. When she opened her eyes, everything was back to normal. The specimen floated as it always had, showing no signs of movement. Suji quickly checked the security cameras, rewinding the footage from the last few minutes. The video showed nothing unusual. She walked back to her desk, her hands shaking slightly as she typed up her observation report. 2359. Possible anomaly observed in specimen 4A, movement detected visually, but unconfirmed by sensors. Recommend increasing monitoring sensitivity. Note: power fluctuations coincident with event. Suji attached the sensor logs, though she knew they would show nothing unusual. She hesitated before adding one final note. Personal observation. Specimen orientation appeared to change during power fluctuation. Duration approximately 3 minutes. Unable to verify with current monitoring equipment. Request additional observation devices for night shift. She sent the report, knowing it would probably be dismissed like all her previous concerns about Chamber 4. The day shift scientists would read it and attribute her observations to tired eyes and an overactive imagination. Maybe they were right. Maybe the long nights were finally getting to her. The clock now showed 12:27 a.m. Suji got up to make another cup of coffee, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled over her. As she walked to the break room, she didn't notice the small screen on her desk flickering briefly to life. For just a second, it displayed a series of complex mathematical equations that hadn't been there before returning to its normal display. In Chamber 4, the specimen continued to float, seemingly lifeless. But if anyone had been watching very, very carefully, they might have noticed that it was now oriented exactly 3.27 degrees different from its previous position. Kim Do-ha rubbed his tired eyes as he reviewed the security footage for the third time. Something wasn't right in the research station, and as lead security officer, it was his job to figure out what. The past week had brought too many strange events to ignore. He pulled up Suji's report from the previous night. While other staff members dismissed her concerns, Do-ha had learned to trust her instincts. She was one of the few people on the station who paid attention to small details. "Computer, show me all camera feeds from midnight to 12:30 am last night," he commanded. The screen split into multiple views showing different areas of the station. The footage played normally until exactly midnight. Then, like clockwork, came the 3-minute power fluctuation. Do-ha leaned closer to the screen, watching each camera carefully. Most showed nothing unusual, but the feed from Laboratory Section E caught his attention. "Stop playback," he said sharply. "Rewind 20 seconds and play at half speed." There, just for a fraction of a second, a shadow moved across the wall. It wasn't the shadow of any person or equipment. It seemed to move against the direction of the light sources, which was impossible. Do-ha's tablet beeped with a new message. It was from the maintenance team. Strange noises reported in ventilation. Shaft 7B's scratching sounds. Third report this week. Please investigate. He grabbed his security tablet and headed to the ventilation control room. The station's maintenance chief, a gruff old technician named Choi Sung-min, was waiting for him. About time someone from security showed up. Sung-min grumbled. "Listen to this." He played an audio recording from the ventilation system. At first, Do-ha heard only the normal hum of air moving through the shafts. Then came something else, a rhythmic scratching, almost like Morse code. But the pattern made no sense. "When was this recorded?" Do-ha asked, making notes on his tablet. "Last night, midnight exactly. Lasted 3 minutes and 27 seconds. Sung-min crossed his arms. "Same as the night before, and the night before that." Do-ha felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. The timing matched the power fluctuations perfectly. "Have you checked the shafts?" he asked. "Of course we have. Found nothing. Not even dust out of place." Sung-min shook his head. "But here's the weird part. The sound seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Can't pin down the source." Do-ha's tablet beeped again. This time, it was an alert from the station's AI. "Warning. Multiple system anomalies detected. Unable to classify. Request security investigation." He pulled up the AI's report. Temperature variations, electromagnetic disturbances, and strange data patterns appeared across multiple systems. But every time the AI tried to analyze them, the results came back inconclusive. "I need to check something," Do-ha told Sung-min. "Send me any new recordings right away." He headed straight for Laboratory Section E, where Suji worked. The laboratory was empty at this hour, with only the soft hum of equipment breaking the silence. Do-ha walked to Containment Chamber 4 and studied the specimen inside. The dark, coral-like object floated peacefully in its tank. Do-ha checked his tablet. According to the logs, the specimen had never shown any signs of activity. But something caught his eye. The specimen's position seemed different from what he remembered seeing in yesterday's footage. He pulled out a small device from his pocket, an old electromagnetic field detector he'd kept from his military days. As he switched it on, the needle jumped slightly. "Computer, what's the normal EM reading for this specimen?" he asked. "Historical electromagnetic readings for specimen 4A, 0.003 milligauss," the computer responded. Do-ha looked at his detector. The current reading was 3.27 milligauss. He took out his personal recorder and spoke quietly. "Security log. Officer Kim Do-ha. Multiple anomalies detected, all occurring at midnight, all lasting exactly 3 minutes and 27 seconds. Specimen 4 is showing unusual EM readings. Requesting immediate review of containment protocols. Something is happening in this station, and I don't think we're as alone as we think we are." As if in response, the lights flickered briefly, and somewhere in the ventilation system, the scratching began again. Sujai stared at her computer screen, fighting to stay awake. It was 11:55 p.m., and she had prepared for tonight. 3 cameras sat on her desk, all fully charged. Her phone was ready to record video. If anything strange happened again, she would catch it this time. The lab felt colder than usual. Park Jin-woo, another scientist who had stayed late to finish his work, noticed her setting up the cameras. "You're still hung up on that specimen?" Jin-woo asked, packing up his things. "Suji, you need more sleep. All this midnight stuff is getting to your head." "Just wait 5 more minutes," Suji said. "Stay and watch with me." Jin-woo sighed but pulled up a chair. "Fine. 5 minutes. Then you're going to admit this is all in your imagination." They watched Chamber 4 together. The specimen floated as it always did, dark and lifeless. The clock ticked closer to midnight. Suji started all 3 cameras recording. 11:59 p.m. "See, nothing's happening," Jin-woo said, standing up. "I'm going to." The lights flickered. Midnight. All 3 cameras died at once. Suji's phone screen went black. The temperature dropped so quickly they could see their breath in the air. Then they saw it. A shadow, darker than the darkest black, moved across the laboratory floor. It didn't follow the rules of light and shadow. It moved like water, flowing upward against the wall. Jin-woo stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. The shadow stopped moving. Slowly, it began to take shape. Suji watched, her heart pounding, as it formed into something like a human outline, but wrong in subtle ways. Too tall, too thin, with angles that shouldn't be possible. That's not. Jin-woo couldn't finish his sentence. He grabbed Suji's arm. "We need to leave. Now." But Suji stood her ground. The shadow figure wasn't threatening them. Instead, it seemed to be trying to point at something. Suji followed its direction with her eyes and gasped. Numbers were appearing on her computer screen. Not random numbers, complex equations. They flashed by too quickly to read, but she recognized some symbols from her quantum physics courses. "Jin-woo," she whispered, "get your phone out. Try to record the screen." "It won't work," he said, his voice shaking. "But look at the specimen." In Chamber 4, the dark coral-like object was changing. It pulsed with a faint blue light, matching the rhythm of the equations flashing on the screen. The shadow figure moved closer to the chamber, and the specimen's glow grew stronger. Suji took a step toward the chamber. The shadow figure turned toward her, at least she thought it did. It was hard to tell which way it was facing when it had no clear front or back. Then it raised what might have been an arm and touched the glass of Chamber 4. The specimen inside blazed with light, and for just a second, Suji saw something impossible. The shadow became transparent, and through it, she glimpsed another place. A vast laboratory, much bigger than theirs, filled with strange machines and creatures she couldn't describe. The vision lasted only a moment. Then all the lights in the lab came back on at full brightness. The shadow vanished. The specimen returned to its normal, dark state. Their phones and cameras started working again. Jin-woo sat heavily in his chair, his face pale. "Tell me you saw that too." Suji nodded, already pulling up her computer's activity logs. Most of the equations were gone, but a few remained. They made no sense to her, but she knew they were important. "Computer, what time is it?" she asked. 12:03 a.m., the computer responded. 3 minutes and 27 seconds, just like always. Suji looked at Jin-woo, who was still staring at Chamber 4. "Still think it's all in my imagination." Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Security Officer Kim Do-ha. "Need to speak with you both immediately. Don't tell anyone else what you saw. Meet me in Security Office 2 in 10 minutes. Bring any data you collected." Sujay gathered her files with shaking hands. Whatever was trying to make contact, it wasn't just reaching out to her anymore. And now she had a witness. Lee Mirai sat at her communications desk, surrounded by screens showing data from the station's systems. As the night shift communications officer, she had noticed the strange patterns in the station's power usage weeks ago. Tonight, she was determined to prove they meant something. "Computer, show me power consumption data for the past month," she said, typing quickly on her keyboard. "Display it as a wave pattern." The main screen filled with flowing lines showing power usage. Most of it looked normal, regular ups and downs as systems turned on and off. But every night at midnight, there was a tiny spike that lasted exactly 3 minutes and 27 seconds. Mirai's desk phone rang, making her jump. It was Kim Duha from security. "Mirai, I need your help," Duha said quietly. "Can you check something in the station's communication logs? Look for any unusual signals during the midnight power spikes." "I'm already looking into it," Mirai said. "Come to the comm center. There's something you need to see." While waiting for Duha, Mirai dug deeper into the data. The power spikes weren't random. They'd followed a clear pattern. She grabbed a paper and pencil, drawing out the wave pattern. It looked almost like... "It's a language," she whispered to herself. The door opened. Duha walked in, followed by Dr. Han Sujai and Park Jinwoo. They all looked worried. "Show them," Duha said. Mirai pointed to her screens. "Look at this pattern. Every midnight for exactly 3 minutes and 27 seconds, our power usage changes. But it's not just changing randomly." She showed them her drawing. "See these spikes? They repeat in groups of 3, then 7, then 3 again. It's too regular to be an accident." "That matches what we saw in the lab," Suji said. She told Mirai about the shadow figure and the equations on her computer. Mirai pulled up another screen. "There's more. During these power spikes, something is using our communication system. Very slightly, like a whisper in the background of all our signals." "Can you decode it?" Duha asked. "I'm trying, but..." Mirai stopped as her computer beeped. "Wait, look at this." A new pattern appeared on her screen. The computer was picking up a signal, very weak but growing stronger. "It's coming from Chamber 4, Sujay said, looking at the signal source. The door opened again. Commander Yoon Ta-sung walked in, looking angry. "What are you all doing here?" he demanded. "Officer Kim, why aren't you at your post? And Dr. Han, you're supposed to be monitoring the specimens." "Sir," Mirai spoke up, "we found something important in the station's systems. More ghost stories." Ta-sung shook his head. "I've read your reports. Power fluctuations, strange noises, shadows in the lab. All of it can be explained by normal station operations." "But sir," Duhe tried to explain, "we have proof now. The patterns in the data." "Enough." Ta-sung cut him off. "This station costs millions to run. I won't have my staff chasing shadows and imagining aliens around every corner. Dr. Han, back to your post. Officer Kim, return to security. The rest of you, focus on your actual jobs." As the commander turned to leave, all the screens in the comm center went black. The room got very cold very quickly. "What's happening?" Ta-sung demanded. Mirai checked her watch. "It's midnight." "Sir." Numbers began appearing on every screen. The same equations Sujai had seen before. The shadow figure formed in the corner of the room, tall and impossible. Tai-sung's face went white. "What? What is that?" "That, sir," Mirai said calmly, "is what we've been trying to tell you about. And I think it's finally ready to talk to all of us." The shadow moved toward them, and the real communication was about to begin. No one in the communications center moved as the shadow figure glided across the room. Commander Ta-sung had backed himself against the wall, his usual confidence gone. Sujai stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overtaking her fear. "It's trying to communicate," she said softly. Mei Ray, can you record everything that appears on the screens? Mei Ray nodded, her fingers flying over her keyboard. Already doing it. The patterns are getting stronger. The shadow reached toward the main screen, and suddenly all the computers in the room began displaying the same image, a three-dimensional model of what looked like two universes touching at a single point. That's it, Sujay gasped. That's why our equipment couldn't detect it properly. The specimen isn't just alive. It exists in two dimensions at once. Duha moved closer to the display, like a bridge between worlds. More like a window, Sujay explained. Remember when I saw another laboratory through the shadow? That wasn't a hallucination. We were seeing its home dimension. The shadow figure nodded, or at least made a movement that seemed like nodding. More images flashed across the screens. Complex mathematical formulas, diagrams of energy waves, and strange symbols. Mei Ray, can you make sense of any of this? Commander Taesung asked, finally finding his voice. Some of it, Mei Ray said, studying the patterns. These energy signatures match our power fluctuations exactly. The specimen isn't causing our power problems. It's using our energy to maintain its connection between dimensions. Jinwoo, who had been quiet until now, pointed at one of the screens. Look at these numbers. They're exactly the same as the readings from Chamber 4's electromagnetic field. Suji walked to a screen showing the specimen's containment chamber. The dark, coral-like object was glowing again, pulses of blue light matching the rhythm of the data flowing across the computers. It's not just a sample, she realized. It's a communications device. The specimen is part of their technology, a dimensional anchor point. The shadow moved to the center of the room. As everyone watched, it began to change shape, becoming more defined. Now they could see what looked like arms, legs, and a head. But all wrong, as if viewed from an impossible angle. 3 minutes, Mei Ray warned. Whatever it wants to show us, it needs to do it quickly. The creature raised its arms, and suddenly the air in the middle of the room seemed to split open. Through the gap, they could all see the other laboratory. Enormous machines, strange lights, and beings similar to their visitor moving about with purpose. It's showing us its home, Suji whispered. Commander Taesung stepped forward. But why? Why reach out to us like this? The gap in space widened slightly, and they could see more of the other dimension. The beings there were working frantically, gathering around what looked like a massive screen showing something that made everyone's blood run cold. A map of space with Earth clearly marked, and something huge approaching it. 20 seconds left. Mei Ray called out, the shadow being turned to face them all. In their minds, they heard not words but feelings, urgent warnings, offers of help, and a deep concern for Earth's safety. It came here to warn us, Duha said. Something's coming, isn't it? Something bad. The shadow nodded again. The gap between dimensions began to close. 10 seconds. Sujay rushed forward. Wait, how can we contact you again? The beam pointed to Chamber 4, then to Mei Ray's computers, and finally to its own head. Just before it vanished, one final image appeared on all the screens, a complex diagram showing how to modify their communication equipment. Time's up, Mei Ray said. The room returned to normal. The shadow was gone. The specimen in Chamber 4 stopped glowing. But the screens still showed the diagram, proof that it hadn't been a dream. Commander Taesung looked at his team. I believe, he said slowly, we have some work to do. Dr. Han, Officer Kim, gather everyone you trust. We need to figure out what's coming and how to prepare for it. Suji nodded, already thinking about the modifications they would need to make to their equipment. They had finally made contact, but she knew this was just the beginning. Mei Ray hadn't slept in 24 hours, but she couldn't stop now. The communication center looked like a war room, with papers covered and calculations spread across every surface. Suji and Jinwoo worked nearby, modifying equipment according to the aliens' diagrams. I think I've got something, Mary said, pointing to her main screen. These power patterns we've been seeing. They're not just random signals. They're pieces of a message sent over and over. Duha looked up from his security monitors. Can you decode it? I'm trying. Mary typed quickly, running the patterns through her translation program. The mathematics is like nothing I've ever seen. It's like they're speaking in pure physics. Sujai connected another modified sensor to their main computer. The device looked strange, with parts that seemed to point in impossible directions. The visitor's dimension operates under different physical laws, she explained. That's why normal equipment couldn't detect their signals properly. Commander Ta-Sung walked in, carrying fresh coffee for everyone. Dark circles under his eyes showed he hadn't slept either. Any progress? Yes, Mary said suddenly, sitting up straight. Look at this. Her screen showed a series of images, star maps, energy readings, and what looked like a massive object moving through space. The computer translated the alien mathematics into something they could understand. It's a warning, she said, her voice shaking. Something is coming toward Earth. Something big. How big? Commander Ta-Sung asked. Planet-sized, Sujai answered, looking at the calculations. But it's not a planet. It's alive. Some kind of space-dwelling creature that consumes energy from entire solar systems. Jin Woo pulled up more translated data. According to these readings, it destroyed the visitor's home system. Their civilization barely survived by learning to exist partially in another dimension. That's why they're helping us, Duha realized. They don't want the same thing to happen to Earth. Myre's computer beeped. New data was coming in through their modified equipment. They're sending more information, she said. Looks like defensive technologies. Ways to redirect energy so the creature can't detect our solar system. Commander Ta-Sung frowned. Can we trust this? For all we know, these modifications could be making us more vulnerable. Sir, Sujai said respectfully, I studied their communications. The mathematics they're using, it's pure truth. You can't lie in the language of physics. These equations either work or they don't. And, he asked, they work. We've tested them on a small scale. The principles are sound, just, advanced, way beyond our current science. Suddenly, all the screens flickered. The clock showed 11:59 p.m. Everyone ready, Duha called out. It's almost time. Midnight struck, and the shadow figure appeared, but this time they were prepared. The modified equipment hummed to life, creating a stable connection between dimensions. The beam moved to the center of the room, where they had set up a special projection area. Images began forming in the air, clear this time, not distorted like before. They showed the creature approaching Earth, but also displayed defense systems, energy shields, and complex machinery. They're offering us their technology, Mary said, recording everything. Not just warnings, actual help. The shadow being nodded, then pointed to a particular set of equations floating in the air. The message was clear. This was how to save Earth. Commander Ta-Sung stepped forward. If we accept your help, he said slowly, knowing the being could understand him, what do you want in return? The being waved its hand, and new images appeared, Earth and its dimension working together, sharing knowledge, helping each other survive. They want an alliance. Sujai translated. We help them maintain their dimensional refuge. They help us defend against the creature. Both our worlds survive. Myre checked the time. 1 minute left. The shadow being raised its hand one last time. Above it appeared an image of the creature, then Earth, then a countdown clock. How long do we have? Commander Ta-Sung asked. The numbers were clear. 3 months. Decision time, sir, Duha said quietly. Do we trust them? Commander Ta-Sung paced in his office, the weight of Earth's future heavy on his shoulders. On his desk lay 2 documents. One was his report to Earth's governments about the alien visitor and the approaching threat. The other was his letter of resignation, in case they thought he had lost his mind. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Suji, Duha, Mirai, and Jinwoo entered, carrying tablets filled with data. "Sir," Sujai started, "we've checked everything 3 times. The visitor's physics is real. Their technology works. We've already built a small prototype of their energy-shifting device." Mirai stepped forward. "And I've confirmed their warning about the creature. Our deep space telescopes just picked up something massive moving toward our solar system. It matches their description exactly." "Show me," Taesung said. Mirai displayed a series of images on the wall screen. A huge dark shape moved between distant stars, leaving dead solar systems in its wake. Even from millions of miles away, their instruments could detect its enormous energy field. "How many people know about this?" Taesung asked. "Just us and the night shift crew," Duha answered. 20 people total. All of them saw the shadow being last night. They're scared, but they're ready to help. Jinwoo pulled up more data on his tablet. "We've run every possible test. The visitor's technology doesn't just hide us from the creature. It could advance Earth's science by centuries. Clean energy, space travel, medical breakthroughs." Taesung sat heavily in his chair. "And if we're wrong? If this is some kind of trick?" "Sir," Suji said quietly, "I don't think we can afford to be wrong. The creature will reach our solar system in 3 months. If we do nothing, Earth dies." The commander looked at the clock. 11:55 p.m. Almost time for another contact. "The governments will panic," he said. "People will be scared. This could cause chaos." "People are stronger than you think," Mirai argued. "Yes, they'll be scared. But they'll also unite against a common threat. We've done it before." Duha nodded. "And we're not facing this alone. The visitors survived this threat. They're offering to help us do the same." Taesung stood up and walked to his window. The earth hung beautiful and blue in the black sky, unaware of the danger approaching it. He thought about his family down there, about all the families who would never know what hit them if he made the wrong choice. "Mirai," he said finally, "send my report to Earth Command. Mark it highest priority. Duha, start preparing the station for full emergency operations. Suji, Jinwoo, get your teams ready to build more prototype devices. We need to prove this technology works before the governments meet." They all nodded and turned to leave. "And one more thing," Taesung called after them. "When our visitor arrives tonight, tell them." He took a deep breath. "Tell them Earth accepts their offer. We'll face this threat together." They hurried to their posts. In the laboratory, the specimen in Chamber 4 began to glow softly, as if it knew what was coming. The modified equipment hummed to life as midnight approached. Taesung watched from his office window as small lights flickered across the station, all the systems powering up for contact. He thought about how history would remember this moment if they survived to write it. His desk phone rang. It was Earth Command. "Commander Taesung," a stern voice said, "we've received your report. The Security Council is meeting in 1 hour. They have questions." "Tell them I have answers," Taesung replied calmly. "And tell them to hurry. We have less than 3 months to save our world." The clock struck midnight. Down in the laboratory, the shadow being appeared, ready to begin humanity's greatest challenge. The real work was about to start. 3 months had changed everything at Lunar Research Station Echo 7. What was once a quiet science facility now buzzed with activity. Engineers and scientists from every country worked side by side, building devices that bent the laws of physics. In the center of it all, the original team still led the way. Suju stood in her transformed laboratory, now filled with equipment that looked like it came from a science fiction movie. The specimen in Chamber 4 glowed constantly now, serving as a permanent bridge between dimensions. The shadow beings, no longer limited to midnight visits, came and went freely through specially prepared areas. "Final system check," Mirai called out from her new communication station. "All energy deflectors are online. Global network is responding. Around the Earth, thousands of new devices powered up. They created an invisible shield that would hide their solar system's energy from the approaching creature. On every continent, teams watched their monitors anxiously. 15 minutes until the creature enters detection range, Jinwoo reported, checking the deep space sensors. Commander Ta Sung entered the lab, followed by Duha and several world leaders who had come to witness this moment. The past months have been hard, convincing Earth's governments to work together, but the shadow being's evidence had been undeniable. Are we ready? Ta Sung asked. As ready as we'll ever be, Suji answered. She looked at their main shadow being contact, whom they had named Atlas. Everything is set up exactly as you showed us. Atlas nodded, its form more solid now that they had better equipment to perceive it. Through their new communication system, they could understand its thoughts clearly. The creature approaches, Atlas transmitted. Now we will see if your people built the devices correctly. The main screen showed the massive shape moving toward their solar system. It looked like a huge dark cloud, but sensors showed it was alive, ancient, and hungry. It had destroyed thousands of solar systems before finding Earth. 10 minutes, Mayray announced. The room grew quiet. Energy shield at full power, Jinwoo reported. All stations worldwide report green status. Suji watched the creature's approach on their quantum sensors, technology they hadn't even dreamed of 3 months ago. The shadow beings had changed everything, teaching humans how to see beyond their own dimension. 5 minutes. Duha checked the security feeds showing crowds gathered in cities around the world. Everyone knew about the threat now. After the panic had passed, humanity had united in a way never seen before. 3 minutes. Atlas moved to the center of the lab. Watch closely, it transmitted. If we succeeded, the creature will pass by as if we don't exist. 1 minute. Suji held her breath. All their work, all their hopes, came down to this moment. The creature entered their solar system. Everyone watched as the massive being moved through space, its energy-detecting senses searching for food. It passed Jupiter, then Mars, coming closer to Earth. Then, just as the shadow beings had promised, it went right past them. The creature couldn't see them. The energy shield made their whole solar system invisible to it. They watched as it moved away, continuing its endless hunt in another direction. The room erupted in cheers. Around the world, people celebrated as the news spread. They had done it. Earth was safe. Your people learned quickly, Atlas transmitted, something like pride in its thoughts. Few civilizations master dimensional physics so fast. We had good teachers, Suji said, smiling at the shadow being. What happens now? Commander Ta Sung stepped forward. Now we honor our agreement. Earth will help maintain your dimensional refuge, and you'll continue sharing your knowledge with us. Together. Atlas transmitted, both our civilizations will grow stronger. There are more wonders in the universe than either of us has dreamed of. Suji looked around her lab, at humans and shadow beings working side by side. The midnight visitor that had once seemed so frightening was now their closest ally. They had faced extinction and instead found friendship across dimensions. Ready to start the next project? She asked Atlas. The shadow being's form rippled in what they now knew was laughter. The real adventure, it transmitted, is just beginning.